Section 11 of Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus by Xenofonte. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are part of the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kane Mercer. Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus by Xenofonte. Translated by H.G. Dakins. Book 3, Chapter 1. Thus Cyrus made his preparations. But the Armenian, when he heard what the messenger had to say, was terror-stricken. He knew the wrong he had done in neglecting the tribute and withholding the troops, and, above all, he was afraid it would be discovered that he was beginning to put his palace in a fit state for defense. Therefore, with much trepidation, he began to collect his own forces, and at the same time he sent his younger son Sabaris into the hills with the women, his own wife and the wife of his elder son and his daughters, taking the best of their ornaments and furniture with them, and an escort to be their guide. Meanwhile, he dispatched a party to discover what Cyrus was doing, and organized all the Armenian contingents as they came in. But it was not long before the other messengers arrived, saying that Cyrus himself was actually at hand. Then his courage forsook him. He dared not come to blows, and he withdrew. As soon as the recruits saw this, they took to their heels, each man bent on getting his own property safely out of the way. When Cyrus saw the plains full of them, racing and riding everywhere, he sent out messengers privately to explain that he had no quarrel with any who stayed quietly in their homes. But if he caught a man in flight, he warned them he would treat him as an enemy. Thus the greater part were persuaded to remain, though there were some who retreated with the king. But when the escort with the women came on the Persians in the mountain, they fled with cries of terror, and many of them were taken prisoners. In the end, the young prince himself was captured, and the wife of the king, and his daughters, and his daughter-in-law, and all the goods they had with them. And when the king learnt what had happened, scarcely knowing where to turn, he fled to the summit of a certain hill. Cyrus, when he saw it, surrounded the spot with his troops and sent word to Chrysantas, bidding him leave force to guard the mountain and come down to him. So the mass of the army was collected under Cyrus, and then he sent a herald to the king with this inquiry: "Son of Armenia, will you wait here and fight with hunger and thirst, or will you come down into the plain and fight it out with us?" But the Armenian answered that he wished to fight with neither. Cyrus sent down again and asked, "Why do you sit here then, and refuse to come down?" "Because I know not what to do," answered the other. "It's simple enough," said Cyrus. "Come down and take your trial." "And who shall try me?" asked the king. "He," answered Cyrus, "to whom God has given the power to treat you as he lists, without trial at all." Thereupon the Armenian came down, yielding to necessity, and Cyrus took him and all he had and placed him in the centre of the camp, for all his forces were now at hand. Meanwhile Tigranes, the elder son of the king, was on his way home from a far country. In old days he had hunted with Cyrus and had been his friend, and now, when he heard what had happened, he came forward just as he was. But when he saw his father and his mother, his brother and sisters, and his own wife, all held as prisoners, he could not keep back the tears. But Cyrus gave him no sign of friendship or courtesy, and only said, "You have come in time. You may be present now to hear your father tried." With that he summoned the leaders of the Persians and the Medes, and any Armenian of rank and dignity who was there, nor would he send away the women as they sat in covered carriages, but let them listen too. When all was ready, he began: "Son of Armenia, I would counsel you, in the first place, to speak the truth, so that at least you may stand free from what deserves the utmost hate. Beyond all else, be assured, manifest lying checks the sympathy of man and man. Moreover," said he, "your own sons, your daughters, and your wife are well aware of all that you have done, and so are your own Armenians who are here. if they perceive that you say what is not true, they must surely feel that out of your own lips you condemn yourself to suffer the uttermost penalty when I learn the truth." "Nay," answered the king, "ask me whatever you will, and I will answer truly, come what come may." "Answer then," said Cyrus. "Did you once make war upon Astyages, my mother's father, and his Medes?" "I did," he answered. "And were you conquered by him? And did you agree to pay tribute and furnish troops whenever he required, and promise not to fortify your dwellings?" "Even so," he said. "Why is it, then, that today you have neither brought the tribute nor sent the troops, and are building forts?" "I set my heart on liberty. It seemed to me so fair a thing to be free myself, and to leave freedom to my sons." "And fair and good it is," said Cyrus, "to fight for freedom and choose death rather than slavery. But if a man is worsted in war or enslaved by any other means, and then attempts to rid himself of his lord, tell me yourself, would you honour such a man as your upright and a doer of noble deeds, or would you, if you got him into your power, chastise him as a malefactor?" "I would chastise him," he answered, "since you drive me to the truth." "Then answer me now, point by point," said Cyrus. "If you have an officer and he does wrong, do you suffer him to remain in office, or do you set up another in his stead?" "I set up another." "And if he have great riches, do you leave him all his wealth, or do you make him a beggar?" "I take away from him all that he has." "And if you found him deserting to your enemies, what would you do?" "I would kill him." He said, "Why would I perish with a lie on my lips, rather than speak the truth and die?" But at this his son rent his garments and dashed the tiara from his brows, and the women lifted up their voices in wailing and tore their cheeks as though their father was dead already, and they themselves undone. But Cyrus bade them keep silence, and spoke again. "Son of Armenia, we have heard your own judgment in this case, and now tell us, what ought we to do?" But the king sat silent and perplexed, wondering whether he should bid Cyrus put him to death, or act in the teeth of the rule he had laid down for himself. Then his son Tigranes turned to Cyrus and said, "Tell me, Cyrus, since my father sits in doubt, may I give counsel in his place, and say what I think best for you?" Now Cyrus remembered that, in the old hunting days, he had noticed a certain man of wisdom who went about with Tigranes, and was much admired by him, and he was curious to know what the youth would say. So he readily agreed and bade him speak his mind. "In my view, then," said Tigranes, "if you approve of all that my father has said and done, certainly you ought to do as he did, but if you think he has done wrong, then you must not copy him." "But surely," said Cyrus, "the best way to avoid copying the wrongdoer is to practice what is right?" "True enough," answered the prince. "Then on your own reasoning I am bound to punish your father, if it is right to punish wrong." "But would you wish your vengeance to do you harm instead of good?" "Nay," said Cyrus, "for then my vengeance would fall upon myself." "Even so," said Tigranes, "and you would do yourself the greatest harm if you put your own subjects to death, just when they are most valuable to you." "Can they have any value," asked Cyrus, "when they are detected doing wrong?" "Yes," answered Tigranes, "if that is when they turn good and learn sobriety. For it is my belief, Cyrus, that without this virtue all others are in vain. What good will you get from a strong man or a brave if he lack sobriety? Be he never so good a horseman, never so rich, never so powerful in the state, But with sobriety, every friend is a friend in need, and every servant a blessing." "I take your meaning," answered Cyrus. "Your father, you would have me think, has been changed in this one day from a fool into a wise and sober-minded man?" "Exactly," said the prince. "Then you would call sober-mindedness a condition of our nature, such as pain, not a matter of reason that can be learned? For certainly, if he who is to be sober-minded must learn wisdom first, he could not be converted from folly in a day." "Nay, but Cyrus," said the prince, "surely you yourself have known one man at least who out of sheer folly has set himself to fight a stronger man than he, and on the day of defeat his senselessness has been cured. And surely you have known a city ere now that has marshalled her battalions against a rival state, but with defeat she changes suddenly and is willing to obey and not resist?" "But what defeat," said Cyrus, "can you find in your father's case to make you so sure that he has come to a sober mind?" "A defeat," answered the young man, "of which he is well aware in the secret chambers of his soul. He has set his heart on liberty, and he has found himself a slave as never before. He had designs that needed stealth and speed and force, and not one of them has he been able to carry through. With you he knows that design and fulfilment went hand in hand. When you wished to outwit him you did, as though he had been blind and deaf and dazed. When stealth was needed, your stealth was such that the fortresses he thought his own you turned into traps for him, and your speed was such that you were upon him from miles away with all of your armament before he found time to muster the forces at his command." "So you think," said Cyrus, "that merely to learn another is stronger than himself is defeat enough to bring a man to his senses?" "I do," answered Tigranes, "and far more truly than mere defeat in battle, for he who is conquered by force may fancy that if he trains he can renew the war, and captured cities dream that with the help of allies they will fight again one day. But if we meet with men who are better than ourselves, and whom we recognize to be so, we are ready to obey them of our own free will." "You imagine then," said Cyrus, "that the bully and the tyrant cannot recognize the man of self-restraint, nor the thief the honest man, nor the liar the truth-speaker, nor the unjust man the upright? Has not your own father lied even now and broken his word with us, although he knows that we have faithfully observed every jot and tittle of the compact Astyages made?" But," replied the prince, "I do not pretend that the bare knowledge alone will bring a man to his senses. It cannot cure him unless he pays penalty as my father pays it to-day." "But," answered Cyrus, "your father has suffered nothing at all so far, although he fears, I know, that the worst suffering may be his." "Do you suppose then," asked Tigranes, "that anything can enslave a man more utterly than fear? Do you not know that even the men who are beaten with the iron rod of war, the heaviest rod in all the world, may still be ready to fight again, while the victims of terror cannot be brought to look their conquerors in the face, even when they try to comfort them?" "Then you maintain," said Cyrus, "that fear will subdue a man more than suffering?" "Yes," he answered. "And you of all men know that what I say is true. You know the despondency men feel in dread of banishment, or on the eve of battle facing defeat, or sailing the sea in peril of shipwreck. They cannot touch their food or take their rest because of their alarm, while it may often be that exiles themselves, the conquered or the enslaved, can eat and sleep better than men who have not known adversity. Think of those panic-stricken creatures who through fear of capture and death have died before their day, have hurled themselves from cliffs, hanged themselves, or set the knife to their throats. So cruelly can fear, the prince of horrors, bind and subjugate the souls of men. And what think you does my father feel at this moment? He, whose fears are not for himself alone, but for us all, for his wife and for his children. And Cyrus said, Today and at this time it may be with him as you say, but I still think that the same man will well be insolent in good fortune and cringing in defeat. Let such a one go free again, and he will return to his arrogance and trouble us once more. I do not deny it, Cyrus, said the prince. Our offences are such that you may well mistrust us, but you have it in your power to set garrisons in our land, and hold our strong places, and take what pledges you think best. And even so, he added, you will not find that we fret against our chains, for we shall remember we have only ourselves to blame. Whereas if you hand over the government to some who have not offended, they may either think that you mistrust them, and thus, although you are their benefactor, you cannot be their friend, or else, in your anxiety not to rouse their enmity, you may leave no check on their insolence, and in the end you will need to sober them even more than us. Nay, but by all the gods, cried Cyrus, little joy should I ever take in those who served me from necessity alone. Only if I recognize some touch of friendship or goodwill in the help it is their duty to render, I could find it easier to forgive them all their faults than accept the full discharge of service paid upon the compulsion by those who hate me. Then Tigranes answered, You speak of friendship, but can you ever find elsewhere so great a friendship as you may find with us? Surely I can, he answered, and with those who have never been my enemies, if I choose to be their benefactor as you would have me yours. But today and now, can you find another man in the world whom you could benefit as you can benefit my father? Say you let a man live who has never done you wrong. Will he be grateful for the boon? Say he need not lose his children and his wife. Will he love you for that more than one who knows he well deserved the loss? Say he may not sit upon the throne of Armenia. Will he suffer from that as we shall suffer? And it is not clear that the one who feels the pain of forfeiture the most will be the one most grateful for the granting of the gift? And if you have it at all at heart to leave matters settled here, think for yourself and see where tranquillity will lie when your back is turned. Will it be with the new dynasty, or with the old familiar house? And if you want as large a force as possible at your command, where will you find a man better fitted to test the muster roll than the general who has used it time and again? If you need money, who will provide the ways and means better than he who knows and can command all the resources of the country? I warn you as a friend, he added, that if you throw us aside, you will do yourself more harm than ever my father could have done. Such were the pleadings of the prince, and Cyrus, as he listened, was overjoyed, for he felt he would accomplish to the full all he had promised Cyaxares. His own words came back to him, I hope to make the Armenian a better friend than before. Thereupon he turned to the king and said, Son of Armenia, if I were indeed to hearken unto you and yours in this, tell me, how large an army would you send me, and how much money for the war? And the king replied, The simplest answer I can make, and the most straightforward, is to tell you what my power is, and then you may take the men you choose, and leave the rest to garrison the country. And so with the money, it is only fair that you should know the whole of our wealth, and with that knowledge to guide you, you will take what you like and leave what you like. And Cyrus said, Tell me then, and tell me true, how great is your power and your wealth? Whereupon the Armenian replied, Our cavalry is 8,000 strong, and our infantry 40,000, and our wealth, said he, if I include the treasures which my father left, amounts in silver to more than 3,000 talents. And Cyrus, without more ado, said at once, Of your whole armament you shall give me half, not more, since your neighbours the Chaldeans are at war with you. But for the tribute, Instead of the 50 talents which you paid before, you shall hand over twice as much to Cyaxares, because you made default, and you will lend me another 100 for myself, and I hereby promise you, if God be bountiful, I will requite you for the loan with things of higher worth, or I will pay the money back in full, if I can, and if I cannot, you may blame me for want of ability, but not for want of will." But the Armenian cried, "By all the gods, Cyrus, speak not so, or you will put me out of heart. I beg you to look on all I have as yours, what you leave behind as well as what you take away." "So be it then," answered Cyrus, "and to ransom your wife, how much money would you give?" "All that I have," said he. "And for your sons?" "For them too, all that I have." "Good," answered Cyrus, "but is not that already twice as much as you possess?" "And you, Tigranes," said he, "at what price would you redeem your bride?" Now the youth was but newly wedded, and his wife was beyond all things dear to him. "I would give my life," said he, "to save her from slavery." "Take her then," said Cyrus, "she is yours, for I hold that she has never yet been made a prisoner, seeing that her husband never deserted us. And you, son of Armenia," said he, turning to the king, "you shall take home your wife and children, and pay no ransom for them, so that they shall not feel they have come to you from slavery. But now," he added, "you shall stay and sup with us, and afterwards you shall go wherever you wish." And so the Armenians stayed. But when the company broke up, after the evening meal, Cyrus asked Tigranes, "Tell me, where is that friend of yours who used to hunt with us, and whom, as it seemed to me, you admired so much?" "Do you not know," he said, "that my father put him to death?" "And why?" said Cyrus. "What fault did he find in him?" "He thought he corrupted me," said the youth, "and yet, I tell you, Cyrus, he was so gentle and so brave, so beautiful in the soul, that when he came to die, he called me to him and said, 'Do not be angry with your father, Tigranes, for putting me to death. What he does is not from malice, but from ignorance, and the sins of ignorance, I hold, are unintentional.' And at that Cyrus could not but say, 'Poor soul, I grieve for him.' But the king spoke in his own defence. 'Remember this, Cyrus, that the man who finds another with his wife kills him not simply because he believes that he had turned the woman to folly, but because he has robbed him of her love. Even so, I was jealous of that man who seemed to put himself between my son and me, and steal away his reverence.' 'May the gods be merciful to us,' said Cyrus. 'You did wrong, but your fault was human. And you, Tigranes,' said he, turning to the son, 'you must forgive your father.' And so they talked in all friendliness and kindliness, as befitted that time of reconciliation, and then the father and the son mounted their carriages, with their dear ones beside them, and drove away rejoicing. But when they were home again, they all spoke of Cyrus, one praising his wisdom, another his endurance, a third the gentleness of his nature, and a fourth his stature and his beauty. Then Tigranes turned to his wife and asked, "Did Cyrus seem so beautiful in your eyes?" But she answered, "Ah, my lord, he was not the man I saw." "Who was it then?" asked Tigranes. "He," she answered, "who offered his own life to free me from slavery." And so they took their delight together, as lovers will, after all their sufferings. But on the morrow the king of Armenia sent gifts of hospitality to Cyrus and all his army, and bade his own contingent be ready to make march on the third day, and himself brought Cyrus twice the sum which he had named. But Cyrus would take no more than he had fixed, and gave the rest back to the king, only asking whether he or his son was to lead the force. And the father answered that it should be as Cyrus chose, but the son said, "I will not leave you, Cyrus, if I must carry the baggage to follow you." And Cyrus laughed and said, "What will you take to let us tell your wife that you have become a baggage bearer?" "She will not need be told," he answered. "I mean to bring her with me, and she can see for herself all that her husband does." "Then it is high time," said Cyrus, "that you got your own baggage together now." "We will come," said he, "be sure of that, in good time, with whatever baggage my father gives." So the soldiers were the guests of Armenia for the day, and rested for that night. End of section 11. Section 12 of Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus by Xenofonte. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are part of the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kane Mercer. Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus by Xenofonte. Translated by H.G. Dakins. Book 3, Chapter 2. But on the day following, Cyrus took Tigranes and the best of the Median cavalry, with chosen followers of his own, and scoured the whole country to decide where he should build a fort. He halted on the top of a mountain pass and asked Tigranes where the heights lay down which the Chaldeans swept when they came to plunder. Tigranes showed him. Then Cyrus asked him if the mountains were quite uninhabited. "No, indeed," said the prince. "There are always men on the lookout who signal to the others if they catch sight of anything." "And what do they do," he asked, "when they see the signal?" "They rush to the rescue," he said, "as quickly as they can." Cyrus listened and looked, and he could see that large tracts lay desolate and untilled because of the war. That day they came back to camp and took their supper and slept. But the next morning Tigranes presented himself with all his baggage in order and ready for the march. 4,000 cavalry at his back, 10,000 bowmen, and as many targeteers. While they were marching up, Cyrus offered sacrifice, and finding that the victims were favourable, he called the leaders of the Persians together and the chief captains of the Medes and spoke to them thus: "My friends, there lie the Chaldean hills. If we could seize them and set a garrison to hold the pass, we should compel them both, Chaldeans and Armenians alike, to behave themselves discreetly. The victims are favourable, and to help a man in such a work as there is no ally half so good as speed. If we scale the heights before the enemy have time to gather, we may take the position out of hand without a blow, and at most we shall find only a handful of weak, scattered forces to oppose us. Steady speed is all I ask for, and surely I could ask for nothing easier or less dangerous. To arms then! The Medes will watch on our left, half the Armenians on our right, and the rest of the van to lead the way, the cavalry in our rear to cheer us on and push us forward, and let none of us give way." With that Cyrus led the advance, the army in column behind him. As soon as the Chaldeans saw them sweeping up from the plain, they signalled to their fellows till the heights re-echoed with answering shouts, and the tribesmen gathered on every side. Then Cyrus sent the word along his lines: "Soldiers of Persia, they are signalling to us to make haste. If only we reach the top before them, all they can do will be in vain." Now the Chaldeans were said to be the most warlike of all the tribes in that country, and each of them was armed with a shield and a brace of javelins. They fight for pay wherever they are needed, partly because they are warriors born, but partly through poverty. For their country is mountainous, and the fertile part of it is small. As Cyrus and his force drew near the head of the pass, Tigranes, who was marching at his side, said, "Do you know, Cyrus, that before long we shall be in the thick of the fight ourselves? Our Armenians will never stand the charge." Cyrus answered that he was well aware of that, and immediately sent word that the Persians should be ready to give chase at once, as soon as we see the Armenians decoying the enemy by feinting flight and drawing them within our reach. Thus they marched up with the Armenians in the van, and the Chaldeans who had collected waited until they were almost on them, and then charged with a tremendous shout, as their custom was, and the Armenians, as was ever theirs, turned and ran. But in the midst of the pursuit the Chaldeans met new opponents streaming up the pass, armed with short swords, and some of them were cut to pieces at once before they could withdraw, while others were taken prisoners, and the rest fled, and in a few moments the heights were won. From the top of the pass Cyrus and his staff looked down and saw below them the Chaldean villages, with fugitives pouring from the nearest houses.
Soon the rest of the army came up, and Cyrus ordered them all to take the morning meal.
And he had ascertained that the lookout was really in a strong position, and well supplied with water. He set about fortifying a post without more ado, and he bade Tigranes send to his father and bid him come at once with all the carpenters and stonemasons he could fetch. And while a messenger went off to the king, Cyrus did all he could with what he had at hand. Meanwhile they brought up the prisoners, all of them bound in chains, and some wounded. But Cyrus, when he saw their plight, ordered the chains to be struck off, and he sent for surgeons to dress their wounds. And then he told them that he came neither to destroy them nor to war against them, but to make peace between them and the Armenians. I know, he said, before your pass was taken you did not wish for peace. Your own land was in safety and you could harry the Armenians. But you can see for yourselves how things stand today. Accordingly, I will let you all go back to your homes in freedom, and I will allow you and your fellows to take counsel together and choose whether you will have us for your enemies or your friends. If you decide on war, you had better not come here again without your weapons, but if you choose peace, come unarmed and welcome. It shall be my care to see all is well with you, if you are my friends. And when the Chaldeans heard that, they poured out praises and thanks, and then they turned homewards and departed. Meanwhile the king, receiving the call of Cyrus and hearing the busyness that was at hand, had gathered his workmen together, and took what he thought necessary, and came with all speed. And when he caught sight of Cyrus, he cried, "Ah, my lord! Blind mortals that we are! How little can we see of the future, and how much we take in hand to do! I set myself to win freedom, and I made myself a slave, and now, when we were captured and said to ourselves that we were utterly undone, suddenly we find safety we never had before. Those who troubled us are taken now, even as I would have them. Be well assured, Cyrus," he added, "that I would have paid the sum you had from me over and over again, simply to dislodge the Chaldeans from these heights. The things of worth you promised me when you took the money have been paid in full already, and we discover that we are not your creditors, but deep in your debt for many kindnesses, and we shall be ashamed not to return them, or we should be base indeed. For try as we may, we shall never be able to requite in full so great a benefactor." Such thanks the Armenian gave. Then the Chaldeans came back, begging to Cyrus to make peace with them, and Cyrus asked them, "Am I right in thinking you desire peace today because you believe it would be safer for you than war, now that we hold these heights?" And the Chaldeans said so it was. "Well and good," said he, "and what if other benefits were gained by peace?" "We should be all the better pleased," said they. "Is there any other reason," he asked, "for your present poverty except for your lack of fertile soil?" They said that there was none. "Well then," Cyrus went on, "would you be willing to pay the same dues as the Armenians, if you were allowed to cultivate as much of their land as you desired?" And the Chaldeans said they would, if only they could rely on being fairly treated.
"Now," said Cyrus, turning to the Armenian king, "would you like that land of yours, which is now lying idle, to be tilled and made productive, supposing the workers paid you the customary dues?"
"I would, indeed," said the king, "so much so that I am ready to pay a large sum for it. It would mean a great increase to my revenue." "And you Chaldeans," said Cyrus, "with your splendid mountains, would you let the Armenians use them for pasture if the grazers paid you what was fair?" "Surely yes," said the Chaldeans. "It would mean much profit and no pains." "Son of Armenia," said Cyrus, "would you take this land for grazing, if by paying a small sum to the Chaldeans you got a far greater return yourself?" "Right willingly," said he, "if I thought my flocks could feed in safety." "And would they be safe enough," suggested Cyrus, "if the pass were held for you?" To which the king agreed, but the Chaldeans cried, "Heaven help us! We could not till our own fields in safety, not to speak of theirs, if the Armenians held the pass." "True," answered Cyrus, "but how would it be if the pass were held for you?" "Ah, then," said they, "all would be well enough." "Heaven help us!" cried the Armenian in his turn, All might be well enough for them, but it would be ill for us if these neighbours of ours recovered the post, especially now that it is fortified." Then Cyrus said, "See then, this is what I will do. I will hand over the pass to neither of you. We Persians will guard it ourselves, and if either of you injure the other, we will step in and side with the sufferers." Then both parties applauded the decision and said that only thus could they establish a lasting peace, and on these terms they exchanged pledges, and a covenant was made that both nations alike were to be free and independent, but with common rights of marriage and tillage and pasturage, and help in time of war if either were attacked. Thus the matter was concluded, and to this day the treaty holds between the Chaldeans and Armenia. Peace was no sooner made than both parties began building what they now considered their common fortress, working side by side and bringing up all that was needed.
And when evening fell, Cyrus summoned them all as fellow guests to his board, saying that they were friends already. At the supper, as they sat together, one of the Chaldeans said to Cyrus that the mass of his nation would feel they had received all they could desire. "But there are men among us," he added,
"who live as freebooters. They do not know to labour in the field, and they could not learn, accustomed as they are from youth to get their livelihood either by plundering for themselves or serving as mercenaries, often under the king of India, for he is a man of much wealth, but sometimes under Astyages." Then Cyrus said, "Why should they not take service with me? I undertake to give them at least as much as they ever got elsewhere." The Chaldeans readily agreed with him and prophesied that they would have many volunteers. So this matter was settled to the mind of all, but Cyrus, on hearing that the Chaldeans were in the habit of going to India, remembered how Indian ambassadors had come to the Medes to spy out their affairs,
and how they had gone on to their enemies, doubtless to do the same there, and he had felt a wish that they should hear something of what they had achieved himself.
So he said to the company, "Son of Armenia and men of the Chaldeans, I have something to ask you. Tell me, if I were to send ambassadors to India, would you send some of your own folk with them to show them the way and support them in gaining for us all that I desire? I still need more money if I am to pay all the wages, as I wish, in full, and give them rewards and make presents to such of my soldiers as deserve them. It is for such things that I need all the money I can get, for I believe them to be essential. It would be pleasanter for me not to draw on you, because I look on you already as my friends. But I should be glad to take from the Indian as much as he will give me. My messenger, the one for whom I ask guides and coadjutors, will go to the king and say, 'Son of India, my master has sent me to you, bidding me say that he has need of more money. He is expecting another army from Persia, and indeed I do expect one.'" Cyrus added, "Then my messenger will proceed. If you can send my master all that you have at hand, he will do his best, if God grant him success, that you should feel your kindness has not been ill-advised. That is what my emissary will say, and you must give such instructions to yours as you think fit yourselves. If I get money from the king, I shall have abundance at my disposal. If I fail, at least we shall owe him no gratitude, and as far as he is concerned, we may look to our own interests alone." So Cyrus spoke, convinced that the ambassadors from Armenia and Chaldea would speak of him as he desired all men might do, and then, as the hour was come, they broke up the meeting and took their rest. End of section 12. Section 13 of Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus by Xenofonte. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are part of the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kane Mercer. Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus by Xenofonte. Translated by H.G. Dakins. Book 3, Chapter 3.
But on the next day Cyrus dispatched his messenger with instructions, and the Armenians and Chaldeans sent their own ambassadors, choosing the men they thought would help Cyrus most, and speak of his exploits in the most fitting terms.
Cyrus put a strong garrison in the fort and stored it with supplies, and left an officer in command, a Mede, whose appointment he thought would gratify Cyaxares. And then he turned homewards, taking with him not only the troops he had brought, but the force the Armenians had furnished, and a picked body of Chaldeans who considered themselves stronger than all the rest together. And as he come down from the hills into the cultivated land, not one of the Armenians, man or woman, stayed indoors. With one accord they all went out to meet him, rejoicing that peace was made, and bringing him offerings from their best, driving before them the animals they valued most. The king himself was not ill pleased at this, for he thought that Cyrus would take delight in the honour the people showed him. Last of all came the queen herself, with her daughters and her younger son, bearing many gifts, and among them the golden treasure that Cyrus had refused before. But when he saw it, he said, "Nay, you must not make me a mercenary and a benefactor for pay. Take this treasure back, and hie you home. But do not give it to your lord, that he may bury it again. Spend it on your son, and send him forth gloriously equipped for war. And with the residue, buy yourself and for your husband and for your children such precious things as shall endure, and bring joy and beauty into all your days. As for burying, let us only bury our bodies on the day when each must die." With that he rode away, the king and all his people escorting him, like a guard of honour, calling him their saviour, their benefactor, and their hero, and heaping praises on him until he had left the land.
And the king sent with him a larger army than he had sent before, seeing that now he had peace at home.
Thus Cyrus took his departure, having gained not only the actual money he had took away with him, but a far ampler store of wealth, won by his own graciousness, on which he could draw in time of need. For the first night he encamped on the borders of Armenia, but the next day he sent an army and the money to Cyaxares, who was close at hand, as he had promised to be, while he himself took his pleasure in hunting wherever he could find the game, in company with Tigranes and the flower of the Persian force. And when he came back to Media, he gave gifts of money to his chief officers, sufficient for each to reward their own subordinates, for he held to it that, if everyone made his own division worthy of praise, all would be well with the army as a whole. He himself secured anything that he thought of value for the campaign, and divided it amongst the most meritorious, convinced that every gain to the army was an adornment to himself. At every distribution he would take the occasion to address the officers and to all he chose to honour in such words as these: "My friends, the god of mirth must be with us today. We have found a source of plenty, and we have the wherewithal to honour whom we wish, and as they may deserve. Let us call to mind, all of us, the only way in which these blessings can be won. We shall find it is by toil, and watchfulness, and speed, and the resolve never to yield to our foes. After this pattern we must prove ourselves to be men, knowing that all high delights and all great joys are only gained by obedience and hardihood, and through the pains endured and dangers confronted in their proper season." But presently, when Cyrus saw that his men were strong enough for all the work of war, and bold enough to meet their enemies with scorn, expert and skilful in the use of weapons each man bore, and all of them perfect in obedience and discipline, the desire grew in his heart to be up and doing and achieve something against the foe. He knew well how often a general has found delay ruin his fairest armament. He noticed, moreover, that in the eagerness of rivalry and the strain of competition many of the soldiers grew jealous of each other, and for this, if for no other reason, he desired to lead them into the enemy's country without delay, feeling that common dangers awaken the comradeship amongst those who are fighting a common cause, and then all such bickering cease, and no man is galled by the splendour of his comrade's arms, or the passion of his desire for glory. Envy is swallowed up in praise, and each competitor greets his rivals with delight as fellow workers for the common good. Therefore Cyrus ordered his whole force to assemble under arms, and drew them up into battle array, using all his skill to make the display a wonder of beauty and perfection. Then he summoned his chief officers, his generals, his brigadiers, and his company captains. These men were not bound to be always in the ranks, and some were always free to wait on the commander-in-chief or carry orders along the lines without leaving the troops unofficered. For the captains of 12 and captains of 6 stepped into the gaps, and absolute order was preserved. So Cyrus assembled his staff and led them along the lines, pointing out the merits of the combined forces and the special strength of each, and thus he kindled in their hearts the passion for achievement, and he bade them return to their regiments and repeat the lessons he had taught them, trying to implant in their own men the same desire for action, so that one and all might sally out in the best of heart. And the next morning they were to present themselves at Cyaxares' gates. So the officers went away and did as he commanded, and the next morning at daybreak they assembled at the trysting place. And Cyrus met them and came before Cyaxares and said to him,
I know well that what I am about to say must have often been in your mind, but you have shrunk from suggesting it yourself, lest it seem that you are weary of supporting us. Therefore, since you must keep silence, let me speak for the both of us.
We are all agreed that since our preparations are complete, we should not wait until the enemy invades our territory before we give him battle, nor loiter here in a friendly land, but attack him on his own ground with what speed we may. For while we linger here, we injure your property in spite of ourselves, but once on the enemy's soil, we can damage his, and that with the best will in the world. As things are, you must maintain us, and the cost is great, but once launched on foreign service, we can maintain ourselves, and at our foe's expense. Possibly, if it were more dangerous to go forward than to stay here, the more cautious might seem the wiser plan. But whether we stay or whether we go, the enemy's numbers will be the same, and so will ours, whether we receive him here or join battle with him there. Moreover, the spirit of our soldiers will be all the higher and all the bolder if they feel that they are marching against the foe and not cowering before him. And his alarm will be all the greater when he hears that we are not crouching at home in terror, but coming out to meet him as soon as we have heard of his advance, eager to close at once, not holding back until our territory suffers, but prompt to seize the moment and ravage his own land first. Indeed, he added, if we do no more than quicken our own courage and his fears, I would reckon it at a substantial gain, and count it so much the less danger for us, and so much the more for him. My father never tires of telling me what I have heard you say yourself, and what all the world admits, that battles are decided more by the character of the troops than by their bodily strength. He ended, and Cyaxares answered, Cyrus, both you and my Persian friends may feel that I find it no trouble to maintain you. Do not imagine such a thing, but I agree with you that the time is ripe for an advance on the enemy's land. Then, said Cyrus, since we are all of one mind, let us make our final preparations, and if heaven will, let us set forth without delay. So they bade the soldiers prepare for the start, and Cyrus offered sacrifices to Zeus the Lord and to the other gods in due order, and prayed, Look on us with favour, and be gracious to us, guide our army, stand beside us in battle, aid us in counsel, help us in action, be the comrades of the brave. Also he called upon the heroes of Media, who dwell the land and guard it. Then, when the signs were favourable, and his army was mustered on the frontier, he felt that the moment had come, and with all good omens to support him, he invaded the enemy's land, and so soon as he had crossed the border, he offered libations to the earth, and victims to the gods, and sought to win favour of the heroes who guarded Assyria.
And having so done, once more he sacrificed to Zeus, the god of his fathers, and was careful to reverence every other god who came before his mind.
But when these duties were fulfilled, There was no further pause. He pushed his infantry on at once, a short day's march, and then encamped, while the cavalry made swift descent and captured much spoil of every kind. For the future they had only to shift their camp from time to time, and they found supplies in abundance, and could ravage the enemy's land at their ease while waiting his approach.
Presently news came of his advance. He was said to be barely 10 days off, and at that Cyrus went to Cyaxares and said,
"The hour has come, and we must face the enemy. Let it not seem to friend or foe that we fear the encounter. Let us show them that we enjoy the fight." Cyaxares agreed, and they moved forward in good order, marching each day as far as appeared desirable. They were careful to take their evening meal by daylight, and at night they lit no fires in the camp. They made them in front of it, so that in case of attack they might see their assailants, while they themselves remained unseen. And often they lit other fires in their rear as well, to deceive the enemy, so that at times the Assyrian scouts actually fell in with the advance guard, having fancied from the distance of the fires that they were still some way from the encampment. Meanwhile, the Assyrians and their allies, as the two armies came into touch, halted and threw up an entrenchment, just as all barbarian leaders do today. Whenever they encamp, finding no difficulty in the work because of the vast numbers at their command, and knowing that cavalry may easily be thrown into confusion and become unmanageable, especially if they are barbarians, the horses must be tethered at their stalls, and in case of attack a dozen difficulties arise. The soldier must loose his steed in the dark, bridle and saddle him, put on his own armour, mount, and then gallop through the camp, and this last it is quite impossible to do. Therefore the Assyrians, like all barbarians, throw up entrenchments round their position, and the mere fact of being inside a fastness leaves them, we consider, the choice of fighting at any moment they think fit. So the two armies drew nearer and nearer, and when they were about 4 miles apart, the Assyrians proceeded to encamp in the manner described. Their position was completely surrounded by a trench, but also perfectly visible, while Cyrus took all the cover he could find, screening himself behind villages and hillocks, in the conviction that the more sudden the disclosure of a hostile force, the greater will be the enemy's alarm. During the first night, neither army did more than post the customary guards before they went to sleep, and on the next day the king of Assyria and Croesus and the officers still kept the troops within their lines, but Cyrus and Cyaxares drew up their men, prepared to fight if the enemy advanced. Ere long it was plain that they would not venture out that day, and Cyaxares summoned Cyrus and his staff and said, "I think, gentlemen, it would be well for us to march up to the breastworks in our present order, and show them that we wish to fight. If we do so," he added, "and they refuse our challenge, it would be an increase in the confidence of our own men, and the mere sight of our boldness will add to the enemy's alarm." So it seemed to Cyaxares. But Cyrus protested. "In the name of heaven, Cyaxares, let us do no such thing. By such an advance we should only reveal our numbers to them. They would watch us at their ease, conscious that they are safe from any danger, and when we retire without doing them any harm, they will have another look at us and despise us because of our inferiority in numbers, and tomorrow they will come out much emboldened. At present," he said, "they know that we are here, but they have not seen us, and you may be sure they do not despise us. They are asking what all this means, and they never cease discussing the problem. Of that I am convinced. They ought not to see us until they sally out, and in that moment we ought to come to grips with them, thankful to have caught them as we have so long desired." So Cyrus spoke, and Cyaxares and the others were convinced, and waited. In the evening they took their meal, and posted their pickets, and lit watchfires in front of their outposts, and so turned to sleep. But early the next morning Cyrus put a garland on his head and went to offer sacrifice, and sent word to all the peers of Persia to join him, wearing garlands like himself. And when the rite was over, he called them together and said, "Gentlemen, the soothsayers tell us, and I agree, that the gods announce by the signs in the victims that the battle is at hand, and that they assure us of victory. They promise us salvation. I should be ashamed to admonish you at such a season, or tell you how to bear yourselves. I do not forget that we have all been brought up in the same school. You have learned the same lessons as I, and practiced them day by day, and you might well instruct others. But you may not have noticed one point, and for this I would ask a hearing. Our new comrades, the men we desire to make our peers. It may be well to remind them of the terms on which Cyaxares has kept us, and of our daily discipline, the goal for which we ask their help, and the race in which they promise to be our friendly rivals. Remind them also that this day will test the worth of every man. With learners late in life, we cannot wonder if now and then a prompter should be needed. It is much to be thankful for if they show themselves good men and true with the help of a reminder. Moreover, while you help them, you will be putting your own powers to the test. He who can give another strength at such a crisis may well have confidence in his own, whereas one who keeps his ideal to himself and is content with that ought to remember that he is only half a man. There is another reason, he added, why I do not speak to them myself, but ask you to do so. I want them to try to please you. You are nearer to them than I, each of you to the men of his own division, and be well assured that if you show yourselves stout-hearted, you will be teaching them courage, and others too, by deeds as well as words. With that Cyrus dismissed them, and bade them break their fast and make libation, and then take their places in the ranks, still wearing their garlands on their heads. As they went away, he summoned the leaders of the rear guard, and gave them his instructions. Men of Persia, you have been made peers and chosen for special duties, because we think you equal to the best in other matters, and wiser than most in virtue of your age. The post that you hold is every whit as honourable as theirs who form the front. From your position in the rear you can single out the gallant fighters, and your praise will make them outdo themselves in valour.
While if any man should be tempted to give way, your eyes will be upon him, and you will not suffer it.
Victory will mean even more to you than to the others, because of your age and the weight of your equipment. If the men call out on you to follow, answer readily, and let them see that you can hold your own with them. Shout back to them, and bid them lead on quicker still. And now, said he, go back and take your breakfast, and then join your ranks with the rest, wearing your garlands on your heads. Thus Cyrus and his men made their preparations, and meanwhile the Assyrians on their side took their breakfast, and then sallied forth boldly, and drew up in gallant order. It was the king himself who marshalled them, driving past in his chariot and encouraging his troops. Men of Assyria, he said, today you must show your valour. Today you fight for your lives and your land, the land where you were born and the homes where you were bred, and for your wives and your children and all the blessings that are yours. If you win, you will possess them and all your safety as before, but if you lose, you will surrender them into the hands of your enemies. Abide therefore, and do battle as though you were enamoured of victory. It would be folly for her lovers to turn their backs to the foe, sightless, handless, helpless, and a fool is he who flies because he longs to live.
For he must know that safety comes to those who conquer, but death to those who flee. And fools are they whose hearts are set on riches, but whose spirits are ready to admit defeat. It is the victor who preserves his own possessions and wins the property of those whom he overcomes.
The conquered lose themselves and all they call their own. Thus spoke the king of Assyria. But meanwhile Cyaxares sent to Cyrus saying that the moment for attack had come. Although, he added, there are as yet but few of them outside the trenches.
By the time we have advanced there will be quite enough.
Let us not wait until they outnumber us, but charge at once while we are satisfied we can master them easily.
But Cyrus answered him, unless those we conquer are more than half their number, They are sure to say that we attacked when they were few, because we were afraid of their full force, and in their hearts they will not feel they are beaten. And we shall have to fight another battle, when perhaps they will make a better plan than they have made today, delivering themselves into our hands one by one to fight with as we choose."
So the messengers took back his reply, but meanwhile Chrysantas and other peers came to Cyrus bringing Assyrian deserters with them, and Cyrus, as a general would, questioned the fugitives about the enemy's doings. And they told him that the Assyrians were marching out in force and that the king himself had crossed the trenches and was marshalling his troops, addressing them in stirring words, as all the listeners said. Then Chrysantas turned to Cyrus. "What if you were to summon our men, while there is yet time, and inspire them with your words?" But Cyrus answered, "Do not be disturbed by the thought of the Assyrians' exhortations. There are no words so fine that they can turn cowards into brave men on the day of hearing, nor make good archers out of bad, nor doughty spearmen, nor skilful riders, no, nor even teach men to use their arms and legs, if they have not learned before." "But," replied Chrysantas, "could you not make the brave men braver still, and the good better?" "What?" cried Cyrus. "Can one solitary speech fill the hearer's soul on the selfsame day with honour and uprightness, guard him from all that is base, spur him to undergo, as he ought, for the sake of glory, every toil and every danger, implant in him the faith that is better to die sword in hand than to escape by flight? If such thoughts are ever to be engraved in the hearts of men and there abide, we must begin with the laws, and frame them so that the righteous can count on a life of honour and liberty, while the bad have to face humiliation, suffering, and pain, and a life that is no life at all. And we ought to have tutors and governors to instruct and teach and train our citizens, until the belief is engendered in their souls that the righteous and honourable are the happiest of all men born, and that the bad and infamous are the most miserable. This is what our men must feel if they are to show that their schooling can triumph over their terror of the foe."
Surely, if in the moment of onset, amid the clash of arms,
at a time when lessons long learnt seem suddenly wiped away, it were possible for any speaker, by stringing a few fine sentiments together, to manufacture warriors out of hand, why, it would be the easiest thing for all of the world to teach men the highest virtue man can know. For my own part, he added, I would not trust our new comrades yonder, whom we have trained ourselves to fight firm this day, unless they saw you at their side, to be examples unto them and remind them if they forget. As for men who are utterly undisciplined, I should be astonished if any speech, however splendid, did one whit more to encourage valour in their hearts than a song well sung could do to make a musician of a man who had no music in his soul. But while they were speaking, Cyaxares sent again, saying that Cyrus did ill to loiter instead of advancing against the enemy with all speed. And Cyrus sent back word there and then by the messengers, "Tell Cyaxares once more that even now there are not as many before us as we need, and to tell him this so that all may hear. But add that, if so please him, I will advance at once." So saying, and with one prayer to the gods, he led his troops into battle. Once the advance began, he quickened his pace, and his men followed in perfect order, steadily, swiftly, joyously, brimful of emulation, hardened by toil, trained by their long discipline, every man in the front a leader, and all of them alert. They had laid to heart the lesson of many a day, that it was always safest and easiest to meet enemies at close quarters, especially archers, javelin men, and cavalry. While they were still out of range, Cyrus sent the watchword along the lines, "Zeus our help and Zeus our leader."
And as soon as it was returned to him,
he sounded the first notes of the battle paean, and the men took up the hymn devoutly, in one mighty chorus, for at such times those who fear the gods have less fear of their fellow men. And when the chant was over, the peers of Persia went forward side by side, radiant, high-bred, disciplined, a band of gallant comrades. They looked into each other's eyes, they called each other by name, with many a cheery cry, "Forward, friends, forward, gallant gentlemen!" And the rear ranks heard the call and sent back a ringing cheer, bidding the van lead on. The whole army of Cyrus was brimming with courage and zeal and strength, and hardihood and comradeship and self-control, more terrible, I imagine, to an opponent than aught else could be. On the Assyrian side, those in the van who fought from the chariots, as soon as the mass of the Persian force drew near, leapt back and drove to their own main body. But the archers, javelin men, and slingers let fly long before they were in range. And as the Persians steadily advanced, stepping over the spent missiles, Cyrus called to his men, "Forward now, bravest of the brave! Show us what your pace can be!" They caught the word and passed it on, and in their eagerness and passion for the fray, some of the leaders broke into a run, and the whole phalanx followed at their heels. Cyrus himself gave up the regular march, and dashed forward at their head, shouting, "Brave men to the front! Who follows me? Who will lay the first Assyrian low?" At this the men behind took up the shout until it rang through the field like a battle cry. "Who follows? Brave men to the front!" Thus the Persians closed, but the enemy could not hold their ground. They turned and fled to their entrenchments. The Persians swept after them, many a warrior falling as they crowded in at the gates or tumbled into the trenches. For in the rout some of the chariots were carried into the fosse, and the Persians sprang down after them and slew man and horse where they fell.
Then the Median troopers, seeing how matters stood, charged the Assyrian cavalry, who swerved and broke before them, chased and slaughtered horse and rider by their conquerors.
Meanwhile the Assyrians within the camp, though they stood upon the breastworks, had neither wit nor power to draw bow or fling spear against the destroyers, dazed as they were by their panic and the horror of the sight. Then came the tidings that the Persians had cut their way through the gates, and at that they fled from the breastworks. The women, seeing the rout of the camp, fell to wailing and lamentations, running hither and thither in utter dismay. Young maidens and mothers with children in their arms, rending their garments and tearing their cheeks, and crying on all they met, "Leave us not! Save us! Save your children and yourselves!" Then the princes gathered the trustiest men and stood at the gates, fighting on the breastworks themselves and urging their troops to make a stand. Cyrus, seeing this and fearing that if his handful of Persians forced their way into the camp they would be overborne by numbers, gave the order to fall back out of range. Then was shown the perfect discipline of the peers. At once they obeyed the order and passed it on at once. And when they were all out of range, they halted and reformed their ranks better than any chorus could have done, every man of them knowing exactly where he ought to be. End of section 13.
Section 14 of Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenofonte. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Martin. Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenofonte. Translated by H. G. Dakins. Book 4, Chapter 1. Cyrus waited, with his troops, as they were, long enough to show that he was ready to do battle again if the enemy would come out. But as they did not stir, he drew the soldiers off as far as he thought well, and there encamped. He had guards posted, and scouts sent forward, and then he gathered his warriors round him, and spoke to them as follows. Men of Persia, first and foremost, I thank the gods of heaven with all my soul and strength, and I know you render thanks with me, for we have won salvation and victory, and it is meet and right to thank the gods for all that comes to us. But in the next place I must praise you, one and all. It is through you all this glorious work has been accomplished. And when I have learnt what each man's part has been from those whose place it is to tell me, I will do my best to give each man his due, in word and deed. But I need none to tell me the exploits of your brigadier Chrysantas, for he was next to me in battle, and I could see that he bore himself as I believe you all have done. Moreover, at the very moment when I called on him to retire, he had just raised his sword to strike an Assyrian down. But he heard my voice, and at once dropped his hand and did my bidding. He sent the word along the lines, and led his division out of range before the enemy could lay one arrow to the string, or let one javelin fly. Thus he brought himself and his men safely out of action, because he had learnt to obey. But some of you, I see, are wounded, and when I hear at what moment they received their wounds, I will pronounce my opinion on their deserts. Chrysantas I know already to be a true soldier and a man of sense, able to command because he is able to obey. And here and now I put him at the head of 1,000 troops, nor shall I forget him on the day when God may please to give me other blessings. There is one reminder I would make to all. Never let slip the lesson of this day's encounter, and judge for yourselves whether it is cowardice or courage that saves a man in war, whether the fighters or the shirkers have the better chance, and what the joy is that victory can yield. Today of all days you can decide, for you have made the trial and the result is fresh. With such thoughts as these in your hearts, you will grow braver and better still, and now you may rest in the consciousness that you are dear to God and have done your duty bravely and steadily. And so take your meal and make your libations, and sing the paean, and be ready for the watchword. So saying, Cyrus mounted his horse and galloped on to Cyaxares, and the two rejoiced together as victors will, and then, after a glance at matters there, and an inquiry if aught were needed, he rode back to his own detachment. Then the evening meal was taken, and the watches were posted, and Cyrus slept with his men. Meanwhile the Assyrians, finding their king was among the slain, and almost all his nobles with him, fell into utter despair, and many of them deserted during the night. And at this, fear crept over Croesus and the allies. They saw dangers on every side, and the heaviest of all was the knowledge that the leading nation, the head of the whole expedition, had received a mortal blow. Nothing remained but to abandon the encampment under the cover of night. Day broke, and the camp was seen to be deserted, and Cyrus, without more ado, led his Persians within the entrenchments, where they found the stores that the enemy had left, herds of sheep and goats and kine, and long rows of wagons laden with good things. Cyaxares and his Medes followed, and all arms took their breakfast in the camp. But when the meal was over, Cyrus summoned his brigadiers, and said to them, "Think what blessings we are flinging away now, spurning, as it were, the very gifts of heaven. So at least it seems to me. The enemy has given us the slip. As you see, with your own eyes. Is it likely that men who forsook the shelter of their own fortress will ever face us in fair field or on level ground? Will those who shrink from us before they put our prowess to the test ever withstand us now when we have overthrown and shattered them? They have lost their best and bravest, and will the cowards dare to give us battle? At that one of his officers cried, "Why not pursue at once, if such triumphs are before us?" And Cyrus answered, "Because we have not the horses. The stoutest of our enemies, those whom we must seize or slay, are mounted on steeds that could sweep past us like the wind. God helping us, we can put them to flight, but we cannot overtake them." Then they said, "Why not go and lay the matter before Cyaxares?" And he answered, "If so, you must all go with me, that Cyaxares may see it is the wish of all." And so they all went together, and spoke as they thought best. Now Cyaxares felt, no doubt, a certain jealousy that the Persians should be the first to broach the matter, but he may also have felt it was really wiser to run no further risks for the present. He had, moreover, abandoned himself to feasting and merry-making, and he saw that most of his Medes were in the like case. Whatever the reason, this was the answer he gave: "My good nephew, I have always heard and always seen that you Persians of all men think it your duty never to be insatiate in the pursuit of any pleasure, and I myself believe that the greater the joy, the more important is the self-restraint. Now what greater joy could there be than the good fortune which waits on us today? When fortune comes to us, if we guard her with discretion, we may live to grow old in peace. But if we are insatiate, if we use and abuse our pleasures, chasing first one, then another, we may well fear lest that fate be ours which, the proverb tells us, falls on those mariners who cannot forego their voyages in the pursuit of wealth, and one day the deep sea swallows them. Thus has many a warrior achieved one victory only to clutch at another and lose the first. If indeed our enemies who have fled are weaker than we, it might be safe enough to pursue them. But now, bethink you, how small a portion of them we have fought and conquered. The mass have had no part in the battle, and they, if we do not force them to fight, will take themselves off through sheer cowardice and sloth. As yet they know nothing of our powers or their own, but if they learn that to fly is as dangerous as to hold their ground, we run the risk of driving them to be brave in spite of themselves. You may be sure they are just as anxious to save their wives and children as you can be to capture them. Take a lesson from hunting. The wild sow, when she is sighted, will scamper away with her young, though she will be feeding with the herd. But if you attack her little ones, she will never fly. Even if she is all alone, she will turn on the hunters. Yesterday the enemy shut themselves up in a fort, and then handed themselves over to us to choose how many we cared to fight. But if we meet them in open country, and they learn how to divide their forces, and take us in the front and flank and rear, I wonder how many pairs of eyes and hands each man of us would need. Finally, he added, I have no great wish myself to disturb my Medes in their enjoyment, and drive them out to further dangers. Then Cyrus took him up. Nay, I would not have you put pressure on any man. Only let those who are willing follow me, and perhaps we shall come back with something for all of you to enjoy. The mass of the enemy we should not think of pursuing. Indeed, how could we overtake them? But if we cut off any stragglers, we could clap hands on them and bring them back to you. Remember, he added, when you sent for us, we came a long way to do you service. Is it not fair that you should do us a kindness in return, and let us have something to take back with us for ourselves, and not stand here agape at all your treasures? At that, Cyaxares answered, Ah, if any will follow you of their own free will, I can but be most grateful. Send one with me then, said Cyrus, from these trusty men of yours, to carry your commands. Take whomever you like, he answered, and be gone. Now, as it chanced, among the officers present was the Mede who claimed kinship with Cyrus long ago and won a kiss thereby. Cyrus pointed to him and said, That man will do for me. He shall go with you then, Cyaxares replied, and turning to the officer, Tell your fellows, he said, that he who lists may follow Cyrus. Thus Cyrus chose his man and went forth. And when they were outside, he said, Today you can show me if you spoke the truth long ago, when you told me that the sight of me was your joy. If you say that, the Mede said, I will never leave you. And will you not do your best, added Cyrus, to bring me others too? By the gods in heaven, cried the Mede, that I will, until you say in your turn that to see me is your joy. Thereupon, with the authority of Cyaxares to support him, the officer went to the Medes and delivered the message with all diligence, adding that he for one would never forsake Cyrus, the bravest, noblest, and best of men, and a hero whose lineage was divine. End of section 14. Recording by John Martin. Section 15 of Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenofonte. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Martin. Ciropédia, The Education of Cyrus, by Xenofonte. Translated by H. G. Dakins. Book 4, Chapter 2. While Cyrus was busied with these matters, by some strange chance, 2 ambassadors arrived from the Hyrcanians. These people are neighbors of the Assyrians, and, being few in number, they were held in subjugation. But they seemed then, as they seem now, to live on horseback. Hence the Assyrians used them, as the Lacedaemonians employ the Skirites, for every toil and every danger, without sparing them. In fact, at that very moment they had ordered them to furnish a rear guard of 1,000 men and more, so as to bear the brunt of any rear attack. The Hyrcanians, as they were to be the hindmost, had put their wagons and families in the rear, for, like most of the tribes in Asia, they take their entire households with them on the march. But when they thought of the sorry treatment they got from the Assyrians, and when they saw the king fallen, the army worsted and a prey to panic, the allies disheartened and ready to desert, they judged it a fine moment to revolt themselves, if only the Medes and Persians would make common cause with them. So they sent an embassy to Cyrus, for after the late battle there was no name like his. They told him what good cause they had to hate the Assyrians, and how, if he was willing to attack them now, they themselves would be his allies and show him the way. At the same time they gave a full account of the enemy's doings, being eager to get Cyrus on the road. "Do you think," said Cyrus, "we should overtake the Assyrians before they reach their fortresses? We look on it as a great misfortune," he added, "that they ever slipped through our fingers and escaped." This he said, wishing to give his hearers as high an opinion as possible of himself and his friends. "You should certainly catch them," they answered, "and that tomorrow, ere the day is old, if you gird up your loins. They move heavily because of their numbers and their train of wagons, and today, since they did not sleep last night, they have only gone a little way ahead, and are now encamped for the evening." "Can you give us any guarantee," said Cyrus, "that what you say is true?" "We will give you hostages," they said. "We will ride off at once and bring them back this very night. Only do you on your side call the gods to witness and give us the pledge of your own right hand, that we may give our people the assurance we have received from you ourselves." Thereupon Cyrus gave them his pledge that if they would make good what they had promised, he would treat them as his true friends and faithful followers, of no less account than the Persians and the Medes. And to this day one may see Hyrcanians treated with trust and holding office on an equal footing with Persians and Medes of high distinction. Now Cyrus and his men took their supper, and then, while it was still daylight, he led his army out, having made the two Hyrcanians wait so that they might go with them. The Persians, of course, were with him to a man, and Tigranes was there, with most of his own contingent, and the Median volunteers who had joined for various reasons. Some had been friends of Cyrus in boyhood, others had hunted with him and learnt to admire his character, others were grateful, feeling he had lifted a load of fear from them, others were flushed with hope, nothing doubting that great things were reserved for the man who had proved so brave and so fortunate already. Others remembered the time when he was brought up in Media, and were glad to return the kindness he had shown them. Many could recall the favors the boy had won for them from his grandfather through his sheer goodness of heart, and many, now that they had seen the Hyrcanians and heard say they were leading them to untold treasures, went out from simple love of gain. So they sallied forth, the entire body of the Persians and all of the Medes, except those who were quartered with Cyaxares. These stayed behind, and their men with them, but all the rest went out with radiant faces and eager hearts, not following him from constraint, but offering willing service in their gratitude. So, As soon as they were well afield, Cyrus went to the Medes and thanked them, praying that the gods in their mercy might guide them all, and that he himself might have power given him to reward their zeal. He ended by saying that the infantry would lead the van,
while they would follow with cavalry.
And whenever the column halted on the march, they were to send him gallopers to receive his orders. Then he bade the Hyrcanians lead the way, but they exclaimed, "What? Are you not going to wait until we bring the hostages? Then you could begin the march with pledges from us in return for yours." But he answered, as the story says, "If I am not mistaken, we hold the pledges now, in our own hearts and our own right hands. We believe that if you are true to us, we can do you service, and if you play us false, you will not have us at your mercy. God willing, we shall hold you at ours. Nevertheless," he added, "since you tell us your own folk follow in the Assyrian rear, point them out to us as soon as you set eyes upon them, that we may spare their lives." When the Hyrcanians heard this, they led the way as he ordered, marveling at his strength of soul. Their own fear of the Assyrians, the Lydians, and their allies had altogether gone. Their dread now was lest Cyrus should regard themselves as mere dust in the balance, and count it of no importance whether they had stayed with him or not. As night closed in on their march, the legend runs that a strange light shone out, far off in the sky, upon Cyrus and his host, filling them with awe of the heavenly powers and courage to meet the foe. Marching as they did, their loins girt and their pace swift, they covered a long stretch of the road in little time, and with the half light of the morning they were close to the Hyrcanian rear guard. As soon as the guides saw it, they told Cyrus that these were their own men. They knew this, they added, from the number of their fires, and the fact they were in the rear. Therefore Cyrus sent one of the guides to them, bidding them come out at once if they were friendly, with their right hands raised. And he sent one of his own men also to say, "According as you make your approach, so shall we Persians comport ourselves." Thus one of the two messengers stayed with Cyrus, while the other rode up to his fellows. Cyrus halted his army to watch what the tribe would do, and Tigranes and the Median officers rode along the ranks to ask for orders. Cyrus explained that the troops nearest to them were the Hyrcanians, and that one of the ambassadors had gone, and a Persian with him, to bid them come out at once, if they were friendly, with their right hands raised. If they do so, he added, you must welcome them as they come, each of you at your post, and take them by the hand and encourage them. But if they draw sword or try to escape, you must make an example of them. Not a man of them must be left. Such were his orders. However, as soon as the Hyrcanians heard the message, they were overjoyed. Springing to their steeds, they galloped up to Cyrus, holding out their right hands, as he had bidden. Then the Medes and Persians gave them the right hand of fellowship in return, and bade them be of courage. And Cyrus spoke, "Sons of the Hyrcanians, we have shown our trust in you already, and you must trust us in return. And now tell me, how far from here do the Assyrian headquarters lie, and their main body?" "About 4 miles hence," they answered. "Forward then, men," said Cyrus. "Persians, Medes, and Hyrcanians, I have learnt already, you see, to call you friends and comrades. all of you must remember that the moment has come when, if hands falter or heart fails, we meet with utter disaster. Our enemies know why we are here, but if we summon our strength and charge home, you shall see them caught like a pack of runaway slaves, some on their knees, others in full flight, and the rest unable to do even so much for themselves. They are beaten already, and they will see their conquerors fall on them before they dream of an approach, before their ranks are formed or their preparations made, and the sight will paralyze them. If we wish to sleep and eat and live in peace and happiness from this time forth, let us not give them the leisure to take counsel or arrange defense, or so much as see that we are men, and not a storm of shields and battle-axes and flashing swords, sweeping on them in one rain of blows. You Hyrcanians must go in front of us as a screen, that we may lie behind you as long as may be, and as soon as I close with them, you must give me, each of you, a squadron of horse, to use in case of need, while I am waiting at the camp. I would advise the older men among you, and the officers, to ride in close order, so that your ranks should not be broken if you come across a compact body of the foe. Let the younger men give chase and do the killing. Our safest plan today is to leave as few of the enemy alive as possible. And if we conquer, he added, we must beware of what has overset the fortune of many a conqueror ere now. I mean the lust for plunder. The man who plunders is no longer a man. He is a machine for porterage, and all who list may treat him as a slave. One thing we must bear in mind. Nothing can bring such gain as victory. At one clutch the victor seizes all, men and women, and wealth and territory. Therefore, make it your one object to secure the victory. If he is conquered, the greatest plunderer is caught. One more word. Remember, even in the heat of pursuit, to rejoin me while it is still daylight, for when darkness has fallen, we will not admit a soul within the lines. With these words he sent them off to their appointed stations, bidding them repeat his instructions on the way to his own lieutenants, who were posted in front to receive the orders, and make each of them pass down the word to his own file of 10. Thereupon the advance began, the Hyrcanians leading off, Cyrus holding the center himself, marching with his Persians,
and the cavalry in the usual way,
drawn up on either flank. As the day broke, the enemy saw them for the first time. Some simply stared at what was happening. Others began to realize the truth, calling and shouting to each other, unfastening their horses, getting their goods together, tearing what they needed off the beasts of burden, and others, arming themselves, harnessed their steeds, leaping to horse. Others helping the women into their carriages, or seizing their valuables, some caught in the act of burying them, others, and by far the greatest number, in sheer headlong flight. Many and diverse were their shifts, as one may well conceive, save only that not one man stood at bay. They perished without a blow. Now Croesus, king of Lydia, seeing that it was summer time, had sent his women on during the night, so that they might travel more pleasantly in the cool.
and he himself had followed with his cavalry to escort them.
The lord of Hellespontine Phrygia, it is said, had done the same, and these two, when they heard what was happening from the fugitives who overtook them, fled for their lives with the rest. But it was otherwise with the kings of Cappadocia and Arabia. They had not gone far, and they stood their ground, but they had not even the time to put on their corslets, and were cut down by the Hyrcanians. Indeed, the mass of those who fell were Assyrians and Arabians, for, being in their own country, they had taken no precautions on the march. The victorious Medes and the Hyrcanians had their hands full with the chase,
And meanwhile Cyrus made the cavalry,
who were left with him, ride all around the camp, and cut down any man who left it with weapons in his hands. Then he sent a herald to those who remained, bidding the horsemen and targeteers and archers come out on foot, with their weapons tied in bundles, and deliver them up to him, leaving their horses in their stalls. He who disobeyed should lose his head, and a cordon of Persian troops stood round with their swords drawn. At that the weapons were brought at once and flung down, and Cyrus had the whole pile burnt. Meanwhile, he did not forget that his own troops had come without food or drink, that nothing could be done without provisions, and that to obtain these in the quickest way, it was necessary on every campaign to have someone to see that quarters were prepared and supplies were ready for the men on their return. It occurred to him that it was more than likely that such officers, of all others, would be left behind in the Assyrian camp, because they would have been delayed by the packing. Accordingly, he sent out a proclamation that all the stewards should present themselves before him, and that if there was no such officer left, the oldest man in every tent must take his place. Anyone failing to obey would suffer the severest penalties. The stewards, following the example of their masters, obeyed at once, and when they came before him, he ordered those who had more than 2 months' rations in their quarters to sit down on the ground, and then those who had provisions for 1 month. Thereupon very few were left standing. Having thus got the information he needed, he spoke to them as follows: "Gentlemen, if any of you dislike hard blows and desire gentle treatment at our hands, make it your business to provide twice as much meat and drink in every tent as you have been wont to do, with all things that are needed for a fine repast. The victors, whoever they are, will be here anon, and will expect an overflowing board. You may rest assured it will not be against your interests to give them a welcome they can approve." At that the stewards went off at once, and set to work with all zeal to carry out their instructions. Then Cyrus summoned his own officers, and said to them, "My friends, it is clear that we have it in our power, now that our allies' backs are turned, to help ourselves to breakfast, and take our choice of the most delicate dishes and the rarest wines. But I scarcely think this would do us much good, as to show that we study the interest of our friends. The best of cheer will not give us half the strength we could draw from the zeal of loyal allies whose gratitude we had won. If we forget those who are toiling for us now, pursue our foes, slaying them, and fighting wherever they resist, If they see that we sit down to enjoy ourselves, and devour our meal before we know how it goes to them, I fear we shall cut a sorry figure in their eyes, and our strength will turn to weakness through lack of friends. The true banquet for us is to study the wants of those who have run the risk and done the work, to see that they have all they need when they come home, a banquet that will give us richer delight than any gorging of the belly. And remember that even if the thought of them were not enough to shame us from it, in no case is this a moment for gluttony and drunkenness. The thing we set our minds to do is not yet done. Everything is full of danger still, and calls for carefulness. We have enemies in this camp 10 times more numerous than ourselves, and they are all at large. We need both to guard against them and to guard them, so that we may have servants to furnish us with supplies. Our cavalry are not yet back, and we must ask ourselves where they are, and whether they mean to stay with us when they return. Therefore, gentlemen, I would say, for the present, let us above all be careful to avoid the food and drink that leads to slumber and stupefaction. And there is another matter. This camp contains vast treasures, and I am well aware we have it in our power to pick and choose as much as we like for ourselves out of what belongs by right to all who helped in its capture. But it does not seem to me that grasping will be so lucrative as proving ourselves just towards our allies, and so binding them closer. I go further. I say we should leave the distribution of the spoil to the Medes, Hyrcanians, and Tigranes, and count it gain if they allot us the smaller share, for then they will be all the more willing to stay with us. Selfishness now could only secure us riches for the moment, while to let these vanities go in order to obtain the very fount of wealth, that, I take it, will ensure for us, and all whom we call ours, a far more enduring gain. Was it not, he continued, for this very reason that we trained ourselves at home to master the belly and its appetites, so that, if ever the need arose, we might turn our education to account? And where, I ask, shall we find a nobler opportunity than this to show what we have learnt? Such were his words to Hystaspas, and the Persian rose to support him, saying, "Truly, Cyrus, it would be a monstrous thing if we could go fasting when we hunt, and keep from food so often and so long, merely to lay some poor beast low, worth next to nothing, maybe, and yet, when a world of wealth is our quarry, let ourselves be balked by one of those temptations which flee before the noble and rule the bad. Such conduct, methinks, would be little worthy of our race." So Hystaspas spoke, and the rest approved him, one and all. Then Cyrus said, "Come now, since we are all of one mind, each of you give me 5 of the trustiest fellows in this company, and let them go the rounds, and see how the supplies are furnished. Let them praise the active servants, and where they see neglect, chastise them more severely than their own masters could." Thus they dealt with these matters. End of section 15.